Good morning, students. Welcome to our class, and this is Oral Communication in Context. I hope you're doing well today. Are you? Well, that's good to hear. All right, to start our session, let us first have a prayer to be led by Jemery. Thank you, Jemery, for that very heartfelt prayer. Now, please find a place where you are comfortable and remember to turn off your mic unless you are cold or have something to say so that we can have a smooth online discussion today. So, all right, so please settle down now. And is there any absent for today's class? None? All right, very well. So I think everyone is present for today's discussion. Now, everybody, please stand for our energizer before anything else. All right, so our energizer is called I'm Alive, Alert, Awake, Enthusiastic. So 1, 2, 3. All right, please settle down. I hope that energized you a little bit. So let's have a quick review on our past lesson that we had about communication. What is then communication? Yes, exactly. Communication is the sharing and transmission of ideas and information between individuals, both within and across context, media, and cultural boundaries. That's a really good recapitulation. So, for our learning objectives, at the end of the lesson, the students, you, shall be able to first differentiate the various models of communication, second, construct your own model of communication, and thirdly, reflect on how and why people view communication very differently or communication differently. This time, I'm going to show you a video and I'm going to ask questions afterwards. So I'd like you to pay attention to details. Here's the video.
All right, round one. Here.
Got it.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Box. Window.
Batman. Batman and Robin. Wonder Twins plus the monkey. Wonder Twins plus the monkey and Batman.
Gift. Present.
Present! Yeah!
Oh, Leonard. Now, how can you not get that?
In what universe is that a present?
It's not a present, it's the present. Look, there's you and me, it's Penny and Amy. We're playing Pictionary in the present.
So first question, how do you find the video? Yes, exactly. It is very funny and educational. What is its main point then? Yes, effective communication is important to establish unified understanding of things. And finally, how would you relate this video to communication? Very good. Feedback is an important element of communication. And this time, I want you to look at these two pictures and try to compare and contrast based on your observation. So we have the first picture and the second picture. Yes. All right, the picture one shows former President Duterte delivering a message to a crowd, while picture two shows Tony Gonzaga and Lenny Robredo in a talk show. What is the, yes, exactly. So the first picture shows a person simply delivering a message, while the second one shows two people talking with each other and exchanging ideas. So the question is, have you delivered a message in front of many people? Yes. Have you ever talked to someone with just the two of you? Well, obviously, yes. Now, the question is, which of the two situations shows a more effective communication? And why do you think so? Yes, exactly. It's the one that shows more. Yes, exactly. The one that shows more effective communication is the communication between two people exchanging messages and ideas, because effective communication occurs when there is an interaction and exchange of ideas at the same time. So, today we are going to talk about the various models of communication. So we have 7 models and we are going to look into each of the model their features, and of course, a diagram to give you visuals. Now let's start with the first and earliest model, Aristotle's model of communication. Aristotle, a teacher of rhetoric and the founder of an academy that produced good speakers, came up with the first and earliest model of communication. Now, this model is more focused on public speaking than interpersonal communication. So, from the two pictures that I showed you recently, which of those uses this model? Exactly. The first picture showing former President Duterte delivering a speech to a crowd. So, speakers play a very important role in public speaking. To influence or persuade his audience, he must first prepare his speech and analyze the audience before he speaks to them. Now, let's look into the diagram or the model. So, we have the speaker, the message, and of course, the audience who receives the message. It's pretty simple, right? Right. So in this model, communication is a one-way process. So moving on to the second model, we have the transactional model. In transactional model, there is an exchange of messages between the sender and the receiver where both take turns in sending and receiving messages. The roles of both communicators reversed each time in the communication process. That's why this is also called the circular model of communication and is used for interpersonal communication. Everyday talk and interactions are example of transactional model of communication. Now, a great example of this is a teacher discussing a lesson with his students or teachers holding a virtual meeting in which they communicate with one another efficiently because they know each other and they share the same social system. This model shows that there is a continuous exchanging of messages, but barriers may take place and affect communication. So by looking into the model itself, the sender also becomes the receiver after the receiver receives the message and becomes the sender to encode his message. It is again called circular model of communication because there is an exchange of messages, unlike the first model wherein the communication appears to be a one-way process without the opportunity for feedback. So moving on to our third model, we have the Shannon-Weaver's model of communication. Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver introduced the concept of noise. In previous lessons, we've learned that noise is a barrier of communication. So this model of communication is also known as the telephone model, for this is based on the experience of using telephone back in the 1940s, wherein the message was hindered by noise. Therefore, the message received by the listener was not necessarily the message sent by the sender. Now, this is very true because when people communicate through telephone, they usually experience or hear noise caused by either the unstable connection or just the telephone itself. However, with our modern devices today, we rarely experience such situations. Now, looking into the diagram, we see that the noise occurs in the channel, interrupting the message while it is on the way from the sender to the receiver. Now we have the fourth one, Scrum's model of communication. Wilbur Scrum is known as the father of mass communication, and he came up with 5 models, but in the Scrum model of communication he developed in 1955, communication breakdown is explained. So he asserts that both the sender and the receiver should have the same field of experience. In this concept, field of experience refers to anything that makes an individual unique, everything that he or she has ever learned, watched, seen, heard, read, and studied. So in this model, communication has 6 elements, which are the source, encoder, message, channel, decoder, and of course, the receiver. Again, the field of experience refers to everything that makes you unique. According to Bill Nye, everyone you'll ever meet knows something that you don't. So, Scrum claims that communication can take place if and only if there is an overlap between the field of experience of the participants of the communication process. It means that the sender and the receiver have commonalities or similarities. So looking into the model, you can see that the fields of experience of both the sender and the receiver overlap, and it looks like a Venn diagram, right? Right. So our next model is Eugene White model of communication. Eugene White's model of communication says that communication is circular and continuous without a beginning or an end. His 1960 cyclical model, the communication process is composed of 8 stages, which are thinking, symbolizing, expressing, transmitting, receiving, decoding, feedbacking, monitoring, and thinking. He also points out that although one can assume that communication begins with thinking, it can be observed from any point of the circle. Was also the one who introduced the concept of feedback, which is a process also known as to close the loop. So as you can see, there is no beginning or an end, so that means communication can occur during any of the 8 stages. The sixth one is Berlow's model of communication. The Berlow's model of communication takes into account the emotional aspect of the message. Berlow's model follows the SMCR model: S for source, M for message, C for channel, and R for receiver. Now, looking into the model, it indeed follows the SMCR, wherein the source must have the communication skills, the right attitude, and of course the knowledge about the topic, as well as social system in context with the culture. And this is the same with the receiver, as you can see. Both the message and the channel also have their own features. Now, the seventh one is the helical model of communication. So, the helical model of communication was developed by Frank Dance in 1967. He thought of communication similar to helix. Now, what is a helix? A helix is a smooth curve like a spring that goes upwards and downwards. So, this model presents the concept of time where continuousness of communication process is very important. In helical model, communication is a dynamic process. Why? Because communication progresses as an individual gets old and his experience and vocabulary increases. Try to compare the ways you communicate when you were 10 years old and your current age. Very different, right? Right. This is because, again, what this model suggests, communication progresses as an individual gets older and his experience and vocabulary increases. So there is a development. So looking into the model, it indeed looks like a helix. So again, those are the various models of communication. So do you have any questions? None? Then again, what are the various communication models? So we have Aristotle, right? We have Aristotle's model of communication. We have the transactional model. We have the Shannon-Weaver's model of communication, Scrum's model, Eugene White's model of communication, Berlow's model of communication, and lastly, the helical model of communication. Now, the question is, how important it is, or is it, to learn these models of communication? Right. It is for us to be able to picture out and get a clearer view on how communication really works. And lastly, why do you think people look at communication differently? Yes, because everyone views the world differently. Well, it's very important to recognize everyone's differences, and it will always be subjective. So, I guess you're ready for our activity. All right, for our activity, the class will be divided into 3 groups. Each group will create their own model of communication. Using a diagram, you need to create the model with the elements. And of course, briefly explain the model made in front of the class. So you have 10 minutes to collaborate and 2 minutes for your presentation. And also, please refer to the rubric provided. All right, thank you for that presentation, class. With the same groupings, we will have another activity we call compare and contrast. So you need to compare and contrast the assigned models of communication using a Venn diagram. So for the group 1, you need to compare Aristotle's model of communication and transactional model. And for group 2, compare Shannon-Weaver's model of communication and Schramm's model of communication. And lastly, group 3, compare Berlow's model of communication and the helical model of communication. So do you have any questions? None? So, all right. So I'll be sending you a Google form link of our short quiz, and you have you'll have 7 minutes to answer and access the link. All right, are you done? All right, now for your assignment, lastly, for your assignment, I want you to write a reflection and how and why people view the communication, the process of communication and the communication itself very differently. So that's all for today, class. If you have any questions, feel free to channel it to our group chat. All right, so thank you so much. Class dismissed.